we found that thousands of judges have kept their jobs despite violating judicial ethic rules or even the law. And we found that 9 of 10 judges who were adjudicated or determined to have committed this misconduct returned to the bench.
In a meticulous and often painstaking investigation, 2 Reuters journalists have undertaken what is perhaps the most comprehensive accounting of judicial misconduct across the US. Their findings are both shocking and deeply troubling at a time when the actions of law enforcement officials are under such scrutiny. Mike Berens was one of those 2 reporters and joins me now. Mike, many thanks for talking with us. What was the thrust of your findings? What did you find the most eye-opening, the most shocking?
I think it's the awesome power that judges have. And when we started looking at how they exercise this power, we found that thousands of judges have kept their jobs despite violating judicial ethic rules or even the law. And we found that 9 of 10 judges who were adjudicated or determined to have committed this misconduct returned to the bench. And when we started looking at the cases, they were incredibly egregious types of violations. A lot of these are not minor violations. We had a Utah judge who was texting nude pictures of male genitalia to clerks in the office. We had a Texas judge who burst into the jury room and said God was talking to him and told the jury that they needed to acquit, a sexual offender.
Mike, how is this allowed to happen? It seems this is a system excessively forgiving of judicial wrongdoing. How are judges allowed to get away with this?
I think they've been allowed to get away with it because the people who most often judge judges are other judges. And when you have the industry, or in this case, a profession, policing itself, well, guess how they do that? Often they don't do it very well.
I don't want to delve too deeply into the investigation itself because our viewers can find that and read that. So let's talk a little bit about how you did this. The timing, was it coincidental that it came out now, given the context in the US?
We have been working on this for a year. My colleague, John Schiffman, and I started this over a year ago. And what we found is it is incredibly difficult to determine how many judges are accused and sanctioned for misconduct. And as we were reporting and as we got into this year, some of the judges who we had been reporting on so meticulously were starting to leave the bench. One was resigning under pressure. Another one was resigning suddenly with no explanation. And then given these resignations and people who we had been reporting on and the confluence of events that are going on in society today, we realized that it was perfect timing. And the editors decided, let's do this now because it's so important. And it does resonate about the secrecy and silence of a system that seems to be designed to protect the interest of judges, not victims.
There's a fascinating sidebar as well to the piece that offers an insight into how you do your job, the research, the methodology, building spreadsheets, databases. How laborious is a process like this? Or do you find it exciting detective work, if you like?
I find it exhilarating. I love the hunt. The finding of information. I mean, you try to find out everything about a system that can be known, and then you try to find out what they don't want you to know. And so we took spreadsheets and we started tracking each and every judge in every state who had been accused of misconduct. We found 1,500 plus judges who had been publicly accused of misconduct. But while putting this together in a spreadsheet, John and I realized we had a bigger story. And that's the beauty of the hunt. That's what I love about investigative reporting.
And what made you start the investigation? I mean, it was a year and a half, 2 years ago.
We were looking around the media landscape, and every few weeks we'd see a little news brief, sometimes in tabloid newspapers. Hey, a judge did this, a judge said this crazy thing, a judge did this crazy thing. And I started wondering, well, how many judges commit misconduct each year? And when you ask that simple question, you find out that it's a very complicated answer and not an easy one to answer. And when you find that things are that difficult to determine, then you realize you probably have a story.
How important is this investigation, do you think, Mike? Where's it going to go? Is it going to spark reform? I noticed that you reach out to the public in this sidebar and say, look, if you know of any wrongdoing, get in touch with us. You clearly want to try and change things. Is there any sign of that happening?
We want to put a spotlight on things, and then we do want to change things. I mean, what we're showing is that the local and state court system touches the lives of so many people, millions of people a year. There are 100 million new cases filed in our state court systems every year. I mean, I think it's something we're most proud of with this series is not only did we track bad judges, so to speak, we tracked the number of victims who had been impacted. And it's a very conservative count, but we tracked 5,206 victims who had been directly impacted by judicial misconduct since 2008. And that's a phenomenal number. These are people who were unlawfully jailed. These are mothers who were ripped away from their children because of traffic ticket fines. I mean, the tragedies and the just tragic stories of people who paid horrible prices and they didn't actually commit crimes. Their mistake was that they hit a judge on a bad day.
Is there anything in hindsight that you wish you'd done differently? And you're not really able to talk to a lot of these judges because clearly they don't want to talk to you. There's this culture of secrecy. What do you think?
I think we did it exactly the way we wanted to do it. I think we did talk to a lot of the judges. I mean, one of the funny stories, the judge in our day one story, Judge Les Hayes, who was found to have been illegally jailing people for over a decade. I was sitting in the back of his courtroom just as an observer, and he recognized that I was a stranger in his courtroom. He had never seen me before, and he stopped court. And he said, "Hey, who are you?" And he asked if he could help me. And I stood up and said, "No, Your Honor, I'm just an observer. Thank you." And I sat back down. But the judge stopped court, called me up and said, "We need to talk." And when he found out that I was a Reuters employee, a reporter, he took me back to chambers and we sat for 2 hours. And he talked about his experience with jailing people. He did not admit wrongdoing, of course. Even though he had been found to have committed egregious wrongdoing. And he's one of the judges who was ripping families apart for traffic.
Mike, it's a fascinating investigation, really an eye-opening and, as I said, shocking and in many ways deeply troubling investigation. Thank you very much indeed for carrying it out. And I know it was painstaking in many ways. Mike Berens, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.